Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast, sponsored by Gold Group Realty. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. Today we're joined by Ron Rabinovitz, the author of the children's book Always Jackie. Ron details his nearly 20-year friendship with Jackie Robinson. We spoke on April 15th, which was the 73rd anniversary of Robinson breaking baseball's color barrier, about how that friendship started and what Robinson meant not just to baseball, but to the American cultural landscape as a whole, on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Ron Rabinovitz, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lonnie. Appreciate you inviting me.
Well, so as we record this, today is April 15th, and obviously won't be coming out for a few days, but today is a very special day for those of us who love America's pastime of baseball, and your connection to this date and to why this date is so important is really why we wanted to talk to you today. Ron, back when you were 8 years old, you met Jackie Robinson.
That's right.
And today is Jackie Robinson Day in baseball. If there were baseball being played today, everybody who played would be wearing the number 42 on their back, which is not being worn by anybody else now.
Right.
So
that's right.
I guess for starters, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with Jackie and how you first got to meet him and where the story went from there?
Okay. Well, thanks, Lonnie. My father, David Rabinovitz, used to tell me stories about Jackie. And he said to me one day, he says, "How would you like to meet him someday?" And I said, "Boy, would I love that." But unbeknownst to me, he wrote Jackie a letter and told him how much I admired him. And he didn't want to tell me that he wrote to him because he didn't want me disappointed if Jackie didn't respond. And one day I came home from school, and laying on my bed, face down, was an envelope. And the back of the envelope said Jackie Robinson. And I flipped. I ran to the kitchen and I said, Mom, I got a letter from Jackie. Then I called my dad at his office. The letter was an autographed picture and a little note, and he said, next time the club's in Milwaukee playing the Braves, he would love to meet me. At that time, the Atlanta Braves were the Milwaukee Braves.
Sure. And of course, the LA Dodgers were the Brooklyn Dodgers. Right,
exactly. So we went to a Dodger Brave game, and after the game, we went down to the locker room, waited for him to come out. And when he came out, I ran up to him with about 50 other kids. I said, "Jackie, I'm Ronnie Rabinovitz. Do you remember me?" He said, "Sure, I do." And my dad standing over my shoulder, and he said, "Sure, Jackie, with the thousands of letters you get, how would you remember?" He says, "No, I remember. Your dad wrote me on lawyer stationery." My father was an attorney. And then he said to me, "Stay in touch." And I said, "My God, he wants to hear from me." So I wrote him a letter, Jackie Robinson, Stamford, Connecticut. No address, no zip code. He got it. He'd write back to me, Ronnie Rabinovitz, Sheboygan, Wisconsin. No address, no zip code. I'd get it. So that's how it all started.
Boy, those were the days when you could just send a letter to a city and it would show up to the right place.
That's right. Yeah. You're right. Amazing. And of course, in Stamford, Connecticut, everybody knew Jackie. And
sure.
My father was quite famous in Sheboygan, so that's how it got to be.
That's fascinating. And that was a really interesting time, because I think for a lot of people who don't know, obviously he's celebrated now, but there were, more than a few people who weren't real pleased with Jackie Robinson breaking baseball's color barrier, or the fact that baseball's color barrier was broken at all.
Right. He went through such hell. He really did. Being the first African American to play Major League Baseball. It was terrible. What that man endured, what he went through, shouldn't happen to anybody. It was terrible. And he pursued and he continued, and he couldn't fight back. That was one of the problems, because he had made a promise to Branch Rickey that the first 2 years he couldn't fight back. He could fight back by hitting a home run, stealing a base, driving those pitchers crazy, but he couldn't fight back. So that was a lot of pressure on him. And when you think about it, Lonnie, you think about a rookie coming up into Major League Baseball. That in itself is tremendous pressure that you're going to be good enough to make it. But then to have balls thrown in your head, death threats, being spiked, black cats thrown on the field, calling all kinds of names, and then trying to persevere and become a Major League Baseball player. It was a lot on his shoulders.
I mean, being a Major League Baseball player is hard enough. I mean,
right.
let alone,
right.
You know, I mean,
especially a rookie.
And I mean, if you listen to people who talk about sports, they'll say that, you know, hitting a baseball is the hardest thing you can do in sports.
Right.
And the fact
I mean, for you and I, it would be like trying to hit an aspirin tablet.
Oh, absolutely.
The way fastest comes in. Yeah.
So at what point, you were, you know, a kid when this all was happening, when did you start to really take in and realize just how hard it was for Jackie and the real detail of all the hell he went through?
Well, as a young kid, I mean, I loved him because he was helping my Dodgers win pennants. But as I got older, I realized how much more than just baseball he was. What he did for this country, what he did for the world. You know, they say Babe Ruth changed baseball. Jackie Robinson changed America. And he did it alone. There was no Martin Luther King. There was no Rosa Parks. There was no civil rights movement. He was all alone.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I was in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and Larry King flew me out for an interview, and he was telling me the first time he interviewed Martin Luther King, he introduced him as the founder of the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King stopped him and said, "Larry, I have to correct you. I'm not the founder. Jackie Robinson was."
Wow.
Which I thought was very cool. Very cool. You know, and my story is, somebody once said, your story is one that only happens in dreams. And I think that's true because I was very fortunate. I loved him a lot, and we became the very dearest of friends. And all through my growing up years, he would write letters to me, and I'd write back to him. In longhand, he'd write to me. And then as I got older, we wrote less and called more often. He had given me his unlisted phone number in Stamford, Connecticut, and I used to call him occasionally. And then when I moved to Minneapolis in 1966, I became a children's clothing rep. I sold children's apparel. I was a manufacturer's rep, and I traveled 6 states here in the Midwest. And I used to get to New York a lot. And the first time thing I would do when I got to New York is I would pick up the phone and call Jackie, and many times we'd have lunch together, and sometimes if he was too busy, we'd just talk on the phone.
God, that's amazing.
He was just the greatest guy. I was with him about 6 months before he passed away, Lonnie, and he was in bad shape. His health had deteriorated. He had suffered from diabetes for many, many years. He had had a heart attack. He was blind in one eye, going blind in the other eye, and he was in rough shape. It really was shocking to see him. And he was so happy to see me, and we had lunch together, and he wanted to hear all about my family, and I, of course, about his. And afterwards, I hailed him a cab and got him settled in the cab, and I leaned in and I kissed him on the cheek, and I told him how much I loved him. And as that cab disappeared into space, I was standing on that corner in New York with tears running down my cheeks, knowing that I would never see him again. He was such a great guy.
The spring real estate market is just heating up, and the team at Gold Group Realty would love an opportunity to help you navigate your way into the house of your dreams. Reach out to any of their outstanding agents. whose contact information is available at www.thegold.group. That's amazing. To me, as somebody who grew up a sports fan, committed,
right.
diehard fan, remain that to this day, you just don't get the access to athletes. Not just, forget the anomaly of writing to Jackie Robinson in Stamford, Connecticut, and that's it. But the idea of, the access that fans get to players is so much less now.
I know.
It's got to be almost impossible to create the kind of relationship between, any relationship between a player and a fan now than you had at that time.
I'll tell you a story. One time he came out of the locker room in Milwaukee. The team was getting on the bus to go back to the hotel because the series wasn't done yet. The guys are getting on the bus, and I'm walking with Jackie, and he's talking to me, and he's signing a few kids' autographs. And here comes a priest with a whole parish full of kids, and they all want autographs. And he's standing and signing and signing and signing. Pretty soon the guys on the bus are opening their windows. Come on, Jackie, you're holding us up. You know what he did, Lonnie? He went to the bus driver, and he said, you know what? Take the guys back to the hotel. I'll take a cab. And he stood there, and he signed every kid's autograph. Of course, he didn't have to take a cab. We gave him a ride. Oh. But that's the type of guy he was. Imagine that.
That's incredible. You don't see that anymore. Even, reflecting back to, 35 years ago when I was, 10 years old, you wouldn't see athletes, they sign a few autographs, during batting practice, and then they'd, go to the cage or they'd, head down to the clubhouse, and it just got harder and harder to make a connection.
Absolutely.
With any player at any level, let alone somebody like Jackie.
Right. I'll tell you another story. Kids used to hand him self-addressed postcards. And as he'd come out of the locker room, they'd give him these postcards, and he'd go home and he would write them a little note and put it in the mail. Who does that? That's the type of guy he was. He was just, cool. He was a real hero. He never drank, he never smoked, he never took drugs, and he never refused to sign a kid's autograph. It's incredible.
And that's just something that you just don't see that kind of sort of selflessness to the fans that you don't see that anymore. Right, exactly. Martin Luther King once called him a pilgrim that walked in the lonesome byways toward the high road of freedom. He was a sit-inner before sit-ins and a freedom rider before freedom rides. That is so true. And now I've heard, and this could be wrong, but baseball wasn't even his best sport. He may have been a better football player.
That's right.
He was at UCLA.
He was an All-American in football, an All-American in basketball. He broke the world record in the broad jump and track, and he played baseball. And baseball was not his best sport. Football and basketball were. And he was the only athlete to this day to letter in 4 sports at UCLA. Amazing.
It's remarkable. That's just remarkable. So, I guess as you look back, how do you not take for granted this relationship? Because this is something. And I don't know and I'm not sure if you know if other kids in other cities have this similar kind of relationship, but this is the fact that you did, regardless of other kids. That's amazing. Like, how do you not take this for granted?
Well, because it was a very special relationship, and I loved him very much. And I feel honored that he picked me. We were so different. I was white, he was black. I was Jewish, he was Christian. I was a kid, he was an adult. I was from a little town in the Midwest, he was from a big city out east. And yet there was this bond of friendship and love. And many people have asked me, why did he pick you? And Lonnie, I don't know. I really don't know that answer. He loved me. He loved my parents and my sister and I. And he felt comfortable with us. And I think maybe it was that I would write to him, and he felt obligated to write back to me or whatever. And I met him, in 1953 in Milwaukee. So this was near the tail end of his career because he retired after the 56 season. So, and I was really devastated when he retired, and I thought, my God, I'll never see him again. Why would he ever want to come back to Wisconsin? And he assured me everything would be okay. He was very active with an organization called the National Conference of Christians and Jews. And he used to come back for sports banquets and functions with the National Conference of Christians and Jews. And he let us know when he's coming. And we would spend the evening or the afternoon or, in some cases, the weekend with him. So I did see him many, many times. And, of course, once I moved to Minneapolis and I got into the garment business in 1969, and I got to New York a lot, I'd see him much more often. But it was a very special relationship. And I feel that a legacy just doesn't happen. The legacy of Jackie Robinson becomes more clear the more we talk about it. He was just an amazing, amazing man.
So today, as we're speaking, marks the 73rd anniversary of Jackie Robinson integrating Major League Baseball. And I believe it was, and I'll trust you to correct me, was it 1997 on the 50th anniversary that they retired the number 42?
Yes, that's what it was. Uh-huh.
It feels like, I mean, those are both great honors, that everybody wears number 42 when they're playing on this day, and nobody else will wear the number again. But is that enough? Like, is there something more that baseball should be doing?
Is there something more what?
Is there something more that Major League Baseball should do to honor Jackie Robinson? I mean, those two things are great, but obviously, but I mean, I heard somebody talking about it today that this, I think, would be considered the most important social, political, and cultural act in American sports history.
Exactly.
This date in 1947. So should baseball do more?
I think they've done a lot already. I don't know what more they could do. I would love to see this April 15th become a national holiday, a Jackie Robinson Day. I think that would be terrific. A great honor for a great man. But I think they've done a lot. I'm disappointed a little bit because African Americans are not playing baseball as much as they used to.
No, they're not.
But and that would make him sad because he would have thought, "Why did I do this for? What did I do it for?" But they've done a lot already, and honoring him every year like this, and retiring his number, I give him a lot of credit for that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's something more, but I do think a national holiday, I agree. That seems that it would be fitting.
It would be very fitting.
And obviously it's important that there are people like you who had this personal relationship with him to continue that legacy that he started and talk about what he did and be so public and out there with what with what he was like as a person off the field. I think that also helps keep his on-field legacy alive as well.
Right. And he is arguably the most important athlete that ever lived. He was a great pioneer, and what he did for our culture is more powerful than changing the face of sports and the breaking the color barrier. He changed all our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
He truly did.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I think he's up there with, Muhammad Ali and what he did in the 60s as a conscientious objector. I guess was Cassius Clay at that point, but no, clearly what he did was blaze a trail that'll be that should be remembered for all time in all sports.
Absolutely, and I do a lot of speaking to adults and also to children. I work part-time for the Minnesota Twins too. They have a tour group that goes through. People come through, take a tour of Target Field, and they offer an opportunity for the students and the teachers to have me do the presentation that I do with a PowerPoint and a DVD talking about Jackie. And I really enjoy doing that. I'm there about 25 times a year. This year it's been a little with the virus and everything.
Yeah.
Everything was turned upside down.
Well, hopefully we'll have baseball in front of fans yet before this is before the 2020 season is all said and done.
I hope so. I hope so too. Such a great game.
Absolutely. Ron, thank you for joining us. Can I ask you 2 non-baseball questions before we let you go? What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Well, I like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur being at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And then also Passover.
Although
this year was kind of sad with the Seders.
Yeah,
we did a virtual Seder,
I think
with the kids.
I think most of us did. Had to be a little weird for everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But
it certainly was nice.
Oh, good. That's great. And what's your favorite Jewish food?
Anything. I love it. I love it.
Tough to argue with that. Ron Rabinovitz, thank you so much for joining us and everything that you're doing to help keep the legacy of Jackie Robinson alive. And we really do appreciate you giving us a behind-the-curtains look on what is a really important day in the American sports calendar, April 15th.
Lonnie, thank you so much. I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Thanks so much for listening, and thanks to Gold Group Realty for sponsoring this week. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. If you have someone who you think should be on the podcast, please email me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. The Who the Folk podcast is a product of Jewfolk Inc. and part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network. For more shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.